Russell Van Dyke. I was born in northwest London, Colindale Hospital. I was brought up in a good Jewish area, Golders Green. My parents belonged to Northwestern Reform Synagogue, the one at Alyth Gardens, and from a very early age I was taken to synagogue on Saturdays. Yes, nice memories of synagogue services, and leading up to my bar mitzvah, which I went to the religion school there, and I think it was a fairly happy childhood. Issues around sexuality didn't really arise because I was too young, and when I went to boarding school, I sort of discovered those sort of issues much more seriously, because puberty comes on and you realise that you may be different to other people, and realising that I preferred boys to girls, and that there were a few like me at the school, but 98% were boys growing up and taking interest in. There was a sort of girls' school down the hill, and there was a lot of focus on that, and you play along with that because you're not quite sure yourself. But by the time I left school at 18, I was no question in my mind at all that I was. I preferred men. The word gay was sort of getting currency then. It was about early 70s, 1970, 71, and it was around, actually been around a while, but I didn't apply it to myself too much. I just thought I liked men, and I suppose the first big realization was when I went on holiday with a friend from school, and we were touring Italy, and we were in Florence. And I just remember we went to these digs, and there was an American girl staying at the digs, and she said to us, "You know that bar down the street?" And we said, "Oh yes, we passed it on the way to these digs." She said, "Don't go there, that's where all the faggots go." And I thought, maybe that is where I need to go. I slipped out to this bar, and I met someone from South London, would you believe, in Florence, my first boyfriend. The person I met in that bar, he warned me not to tell my parents anything. I was illegal then. I was 18, 19, because it was 21 was the age of consent. I mean, he had to shake me to say, actually, Russell, if you tell them, they will go to the police. I could go to prison. I thought, what? I just found it so difficult, but I knew I couldn't say anything to either parent. Even my mum, who I was probably closer to, I didn't think I could say anything, because there was a sort of, the Jewish morality was, it's an abomination and stuff, and it was taken sufficiently seriously. What happened was a few years later, I met Alan, my partner, and end of 74. The only one time, though, my father made any reference to him, and Alan used to come for lunch occasionally, for a chat, was when I was talking to my father about marriage. I don't know why, and he said, "Well, Alan's never going to get married, is he?" I thought, how do you work that one out? Alan wore platform shoes, as you did in the 70s, and flares and stuff. But I think my father may have equated that with being effeminate in some way, because it was definitely a derogatory assumption about Alan. But with me, he probably thought it might have been a passing phase, or whenever marriage came up in respect of me, it was always about, well, there's plenty of time for marriage later, sort your career out, Russell, get a good job, get your exams, go to university, all those things, they're the important things. When I met Alan, I'd heard about the Jewish gay and lesbian group, and I realised that there was a tiny, tiny network of people that had coffee evenings, socials, very occasional, erratic, and I sort of joined that and went to the odd coffee evening, and it was nice to make the connection between my Jewishness and my gayness, because I didn't think that was possible. I suppose it's a bit selfish, but I met Alan November 74, and I thought, well, I don't need the Jewish gay group anymore, as it was then, because I've got Alan. And then I think once you're out of the sort of high point, the cloud 9 period of relationship, then you sort of look around and say, well, are there any networks? And then I thought, well, I'll go back to Jewish Gay Group and see what's cooking, and met quite a few people again, and we both went to what was then the regular thing was coffee evenings, always at people's homes, and generally just to sit and chat and compare notes. But it was nice to do that, and there wasn't really any religious stuff, and there was talk about having seders, and they started soon afterwards. I think they were the first sort of bigger event that started happening also in people's homes, right? And that once that got going in the 80s, I think they every year, second night Seder was held in someone's home, including Alan and my home. I have to say it was all men. I don't think there were any women in the Jewish Gay Group at all, and the name of course didn't help. And there was none of this outreaching to lesbians that hadn't even been considered in those days. Those were the big things in the 80s really. There was a really important weekend. We were sort of friends with Lionel Blue, and we knew him, and of course he remembered me from Ailith Gardens when I was a child, and I knew him, which was quite nice, and I knew that he was gay. So he organised for us to go to a big weekend in Spode, which is a retreat. We could have discussions on any subjects we like. We had services, and given it was very early, really, about the beginning of the 80s, it was really special to be able to go there and just completely relax and talk and network. And I just have memories of lying by the swimming pool chatting, and it was probably some time after that I was asked to become chair of Jewish Gay Group, and there was a sort of gap, someone had left, and I took it over, and that was really a big jump from just being a member and going to the odd coffee evening to doing this. And there were a lot of things I was able to then do. Pride marches were really getting established in the 80s, getting bigger and bigger. And we thought, why not have the Jewish Gay Group bagel stall, bagel and cream cheese stall? And so with Alan and others from the group, we would organise this, and we'd always sell out. Had hundreds of these bagels. We had a banner. And we would march with that, and famous folk, like Peter Tatchell, were in the forefront, and so it felt like a coming out, that very special. I think we got a lot more interest from that. Of course, there was no internet then, so everything had to be done by post or adverts, and I was involved in sort of trying to get the group promoted a bit more. And we thought, well, why don't we have a service, a regular service, once a month? I didn't have the connection, but somebody had the connection with Rabbi Dov Marmor at Ailith Gardens, my old synagogue where I was bar mitzvahed. And he said, well, why not have a room in the new youth centre they'd opened, Ailith Youth and Community Centre, which was new. I just remembered all the paintings on the wall, and it was a very long room. And we were quite small in those days, but we actually had our own place that was not somewhere, a private address which you had to keep secret. And that was a big jump, because to actually be able to advertise an address, could never do that. Where to advertise? Well, the obvious place was the Jewish Chronicle, and this was a scary period because the Jewish Chronicle were very uncomfortable about the G word, and I know on one occasion they refused it, and they said, we can't always put these in for you, and there was stuff on the letters page that was quite homophobic in those days, about one man, one woman, and this is an abomination, all that stuff, and there were counter letters by the great and the good. We tended not to write letters, because people didn't want to come out. There was a lot of uncomfortableness about it, but gradually they accepted these ads, and we put them in, and the group got bigger. More people came, more people saw the ads. At last we were getting on the map, and the other, I suppose, big thing for the group was the awareness that we weren't the only group in the world, and that we were the oldest, but we realised that in the US they had many groups, and the big synagogue in New York was going, and we realised there was a network in the World Congress, and that we could actually attend these conferences that they held every couple of years. And there was one in New York that was very memorable, and just a much bigger family than we realised. So that was very nice. I never came out to my father. He died in 1978, and I was only 24 then. I mean, and we hadn't got beyond the point of me living with Alan as some sort of tenant. But my mother sort of approached the subject some years later after he died, and for some reason, I was walking with her at Brighton seafront where she lived, and she said, I want to talk to you about something. I said, what? And she said, Alan's all very well, but he's nothing special. When are you going to get married and give me some grandchildren? And I said, well, this was a clever question, but do you want me to be happy? I said. And she said, yes. And I said, well, I am happy the way I am with Alan, living the life we lead. Oh. And she sort of went quiet. And I thought, well, that's it. You know, she's accepted it. But she clearly had to do something. So she sent me a letter, strictly private, and inside it was, what you have admitted to me is an abomination. And I think after that she got used to the idea, but I think she just had to tick the box that she'd objected, you know, to this relationship, this abomination. But so that was the difficult period with her, but it was soon over, thank goodness. And I was so active with the group. The biggest event I sort of remember would be I think 1990, right at the end of the 80s, when there was a big conference in Paris, and loads of groups, particularly European groups, went. So there was a big Dutch delegation, obviously a big French delegation, the Beit Haverim, and a few from the States, and it was probably the most memorable and warm and friendly weekend event. And there were some serious discussions about the legal aspects, because we had a lawyer amongst us who knew all about different countries' legal systems and being gay and the issues and the oppression some people suffered. So that was very pivotal. And then I suppose that triggered the thought, well, could we do one in London? And it was a very sort of just a thought in those days. But after a lot of presentations, a lot of mulling between different bids, we won it. So that was fantastic. I'd been probably chair of the group for about 7 or 8 years by then, and it was time, I think, for me to pass on. So I passed on to a woman, which was fantastic. Women were just beginning to come in, end of the early 90s, end of the 80s, and we changed the name quite quickly to Jewish Gay and Lesbian Group. There was a big campaign, I remember at the time, from the new women saying, oh, it should be Jewish Lesbian and Gay Group, and that was stormed on. But I think the woman who ran the group then just said, look, we've got this. It's got the word in. You know, there are bigger battles to fight. And I did a lot of the admin side of the conference, registrations and organising a hotel and stuff with other people. But it was an enormous amount of work, and it was just 3 or 4 days where you basically didn't sleep, because there was so much happening during it, so many issues to address. And that's when another group came around called Hinenu, Here We Are, and they are a young persons group. Well, they don't exist now, but they basically didn't want to be part of Jewish Gay and Lesbian Group, who was sort of wrong generation, I suppose, for them, but they were happy to be part of the conference. Collapsed or disappeared. I think like one person kept I think he said you've got to be 27 or under until he got to be 27, and then, make it 28 or under. So and then I think it just fizzled out. The Jewish gay and lesbian group continues today, of course, very successfully. But in a sense, what's happened is a new internet type group has taken over from Hinenu, called Gay Jews in London. Very big group, with hundreds and hundreds of Facebook type members on it, and they are attracting a lot of the very young coming out type gay Jews, and I think that has been a challenge for Jewish gay and lesbian group, which are considered fuddy-duddies, very private, need to because people are very sensitive about gayness. There's a lot around confidentiality. You've got the synagogue, of course, Beklal Yisrael, which is not officially gay and lesbian, but the majority of people are probably with lesbian roots. So it's a far cry from those early days, but now we've got issues around how do all these groups work together. And I think the Jewish thing should be the bond, bringing them all together. But I don't know how well that is going to work. I haven't been too impressed with the joint working or tripartite working between these various groups up to now. It still seem to be all paddling their own canoes, and for pride you all come together, don't attempt to interact. So from an issue point of view, I think that's something for the future that ought to be addressed. There needs to be a closer working.
You did get involved in a very interesting film project. Would you be able to tell us about that?
Oh yes, Trembling Before God. Yes, I was. The lead on that, Mark Silas, who I'm sure is very publicly known, organised for a film crew to come to his house. My partner and I were there, and we were singing all the sort of Hud Gadya type songs at the end, and the cameras were rolling, and it was really just a lovely, lovely, warm atmosphere. Now, I knew that the film was about the Orthodox issues around being gay and not being Orthodox. I haven't had those sort of problems, and I was able to cope with my mother's sort of moral stance, which was very short-lived. But to be part of something where the issues are really brought out, and in that film, the pain of some of these interviewees when they met their rabbi and were told, I cannot accommodate your sexuality, you have to either give it up or leave the Orthodox world. I think that is a very painful experience for people. So I was just very proud to be part of that film, and it's quite fun. People saying, "I saw you on the screen." I thought, yeah, I was in that film, and it was very special.
So, Russell, could you tell us a little bit more about the relationship with Alan? How did it evolve?
Yeah, I mean, we met before any sort of relationships like that were allowed or considered to be appropriate. And we were living together from February 75 on, more or less as what is now regarded as a partnership. When the law came in, I think December 2005, we thought, well, we're going to do it, but we don't want a big to-do, really, because in a sense it's so late. So in January 2006, we went ahead with a very small event, really, with two lesbian friends and my first boyfriend, the one from Italy, and his boyfriend, and my oldest brother and his wife came, so that was nice. And we had the civil partnership ceremony in Haringey Town Hall, signed all the documents, and it felt very nice to just, we had a little service of sorts, more like just made some sort of, it was non-religious, so it was just sort of commitments. But obviously a civil partnership is not traditional marriage. And if you want a traditional marriage, then this legislation that's going through now about gay marriage is very important. Probably not so important to us unless there's a practical reason. And if Alan was Jewish and we both felt strongly about needing to do it in synagogue, then we'd probably convert it to a marriage. But certainly Alan's not remotely interested in that, and I'm easygoing.
So you brought us some very interesting, say memorabilia, but some Purim spiel way back. Could you just tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, that was a fabulous event. It was in 1983, and we just had so many talented people around, people who could, scriptwriter and someone who was very involved in theatre. And we took show tunes, we cross-dressed, we wrote a whole sort of script, and it was a stunning event. We did it on stage at the Unitarian Church Hall in Hoop Lane, and everything, the whole story of Esther was sort of changed to a sort of a gay pickup on Hampstead Heath, ending up with the traditional wedding in the Willesden rooms catering event. So it was a very amusing twist, on a very gay twist on the story of Esther, and we used, as I think I remember, Bally High being one song, which was about Hampstead Heath, renamed Hampstead Heath, and I think we did more than one of these Purim spiels because the opportunity for being witty about being gay and just having fun. And I dragged up as Esther. And it was just magical, really. What I see today is a lot of young gay people, very confident and very out, and very relaxed about being gay, which is great. But they have to be aware that a project like this, the History Project, shows that things weren't always so easy, and that in the 50s and 60s there were regular arrests. The age of consent was much higher, and it was very, very difficult to live a gay life in those days. And the danger is that people get so relaxed and comfortable, and certainly a lot of the young people I see in Old Compton Street look like that, where the Stars of David like a bit of jewellery and think it's fun. Actually, it's a very serious matter, and one needs to be on one's guard, because at any time, the wheel could turn. So my message is really to do your history and be on your guard and be aware.